So when you're going through like your awakening and stuff like that, like when you actually like finally truly awaken and you see things for what it is, you're gonna be dealing with this thing where you're kind of just like constantly looking for examples of like the things that you've learned about with whether it be in media, whether it be just anywhere you could think of, like wherever you can find an example of what you've been learning about as far as like narcissism, destiny swappers, monitoring spirits, all of the above. Like your eyes are gonna pick up on it so fast that you just genuinely are like, I would not have noticed this back in whatever year you weren't awakened at, like as far back as you can remember. Like you'll be like, I would not have picked that up if I wasn't thinking how I was thinking now. And so a piece of media that I wanted to bring up is this TV series, Marvel Spider-Man, the 2017 version. And I kind of steered away from this series, like when it first originally dropped, because I just wasn't a fan of the art style. The whole thing just kind of gave like a coloring book type of art style feel. So I just kind of just steered away from it. I wasn't really just it just wasn't catching my attention, visually at least. But I'm sitting here and I'm like, I've always been a Spider-Man fan, so I'm pretty sure like watching this, even though it may not be like a perfect depiction or accurate depiction, of the character that I'm used to, I might still be able to find a bit of enjoyment in it. So I gave it a chance and I still watched it. Now, there's a lot of people who say that they, can't really like do the things that they used to, like watch TV and stuff like they used to, like after awakening. But for me, it's like, it's more so like I'm still watching it, but I'm looking for messages or looking for things that I can relate to or that I can apply my knowledge that I've gained now into the media that I'm seeing right now and how they're directing it, how they're portraying it, and so on. And so as I'm watching, Marvel Spider-Man, there's two characters that I really want to, speak on. One being Norman Osborn, and the other one being Dr. Otto Octavius. So the way that they portrayed Norman Osborn in this series is pretty darn close to the comic book adaptation, without all the extreme stuff, because it's still a Disney show at the end of the day. It's still catered towards younger generations, so of course they couldn't go too deep into it, but they got pretty darn close as far as like his mentality and how his mentality, his personality, and how he is as a person. If you want an accurate depiction of how a grandiose narcissist actually is, the way they portrayed Norman Osborn in this animation was a perfect example of that. There was no limit to what he would do in order to be on top of the competition. He didn't really see people as friends. He didn't see people as allies. He saw them as tools, people with skills that he could exploit, people with talents he could exploit. Just anybody, any and everybody and everything he saw as a resource to get higher up on that level. Even his own son Harry Osborn, like the amount of people that he has manipulated, um, the scenarios he orchestrated in order to get them onto his side. Like this man was literally a master manipulator to the highest degree. Like I'm sitting here watching this and I'm like, this man is really playing the game. And the thing that I love about the most when it comes to Peter Parker slash Spider Man is that he's the only character who's actually like wearing a physical mask. So it's so funny to me how he can just see right through everybody else's metaphorical mask, like how he could just pull everybody's mask off of them and just reveal their true identity to them. Like when you get in Peter Parker's face, when you get in Spider Man's face, you literally cannot help but to, you know, you can't hide. You just can't hide, behind your mask because he sees right through it. So that's why a lot of people target him and get irritated with him because he's always foiling their manipulative plans, especially with Osborn. That's why Osborn like put a target on Spider-Man's back so heavy, and why he was trying to convince his son Harry that Spider-Man is the bane of his existence. He is the number one enemy, while diverting the attention away from him and himself. And it's the way he just goes about it, as far as like manipulating even Otto Octavius, who I'm going to mention next. He manipulated even Otto Octavius and just any other supervillain to just basically do his bidding, while trying to take Spider-Man out, while he is trying to orchestrate his plans to basically rise up higher in power and eliminate any competition that he sees might be a threat to his power. Now with Otto Octavius is more of an example of somebody who's going through a dark night of the soul, slash somebody who's also tried to be a destiny swapper in a sense. And I'll get to that in a second. So the reason why I say he was more of like a dark night of the soul is because Otto Octavius was always like more to himself, kind of like he grew up really isolated. He was bullied. He had about the same background as Peter Parker. The only difference is Otto Octavius didn't have an Uncle Ben, to tell him with great power comes great responsibility. He didn't have loving individuals in his um, adolescence to basically teach him right and wrong. The only thing he had was an abusive father who basically taught him like the only thing that matters in this world is power. So if you do not have power, if you cannot obtain power in a certain way, you are basically worthless. You're weak. You're going to get ran over in this world. And so with those teachings that Otto had taken from, his abusive background with his father, he kind of learned just to play the game and just manipulate and kind of destroy other people's lives to feel a sense of power. That was all he was thinking about doing, because he didn't grow up in a background that had empathy, so he didn't know what empathy was. He was only focused on logic, numbers, science, whatever, and things that made sense, things that made physical sense, things that he could put on a statistic board and say, "Ha, by statistic standards, I am superior," in a sense. So after he does his whole thing, when he becomes Doc Ock and stuff, there's this other segment of the show where they adapted the Superior Spider-Man storyline, and that part of the story is when I say it's more like a destiny swap, because he's basically swapped minds with Peter Parker, who he didn't know was Peter Parker at the time in this scenario. He swapped minds with Spider-Man, and he was basically saying like, you know what, I'm going to steal your body. I'm going to use it to its full capacity. I'm going to basically become a better Spider-Man than you could ever hope to be. And by statistic standards, he did do that. Crime rate was going down. You know, essentially the world was quote unquote a safer place. But then came the part where, he had to basically play the role of Peter Parker and, still be, the Spider-Man. And people could instantly tell that like something was off. Like this was not the Peter Parker slash Spider-Man that we are used to. Something's definitely off about you. He was more aggressive. He was more, to the point. He just didn't waste any time. No quips, no nothing. Like just everybody knew something was off. Everybody knew something was off. They just couldn't figure out what it was. But the crazy part is, as he's living, Peter Parker's life and stuff, he's getting these flashes of like Peter Parker's memory and stuff with Uncle Ben and things like that. And as he's seeing, Peter Parker's memories, he's realizing that they were similar, but they were also so different. He didn't have an Uncle Ben, and he was starting to feel the weight of like the actual weight of his actions. He was actually starting to learn empathy through experiencing life as Peter Parker. So that's why I say it like came around to like a dark night of the soul, because if he had not destiny swapped, not only did he realize he could never really be Peter Parker, but he also realized he was not as superior of a person that he thought he was through intellect alone. He had no empathy, and because he went through all that, now he does. Now he saw the error of his ways, and he actually went about and used his intellect for good up until the very end of that season. So I say like, I'm sorry that I was sleeping on the show, but I'm kind of glad I did, because again, I did not have all this information before, and it's just it's just really crazy to see it come back full circle.